Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the heart of what you need to know. Today we're taking a really practical look at something a lot of you have been curious about, making the move to Portugal. We've got a comprehensive guide here, and we're going to unpack it, packed with essential steps and tips for 2025.
That's right. Our mission for this deep dive is, well, to distill all the crucial knowledge you'll need for a successful and hopefully smooth transition. Portugal really is known for its welcoming attitude toward foreign residents, that's true, but a successful relocation involves so much more than just getting a visa. We're going to guide you through setting up your new life, whether you're, say, eyeing a D7 retirement visa, maybe a D8 digital nomad permit, or any other residency path.
Yeah, we're talking everything. From getting your ducks in a row before you even leave home, to finding that perfect place to live, sorting out your health care, and even, demystifying the tax system. Let's get started on becoming well-informed about making that exciting move. Okay, let's unpack this. When I hear moving to another country, my brain instantly goes into, overwhelm mode. So what's the recommended timeline for these pre-departure preparations? And maybe what's the one thing people most underestimate in that early phase?
That feeling of overwhelm is totally normal, yeah. And it's exactly why we emphasize starting preparations at least 3 to 6 months before your planned move. Think of it like building a house. You really need that solid foundation first. So the timeline kind of suggests starting visa applications 6+ months out, then securing housing and maybe starting language study 4 to 5 months before, arranging your NIF and bank account 3 to 4 months ahead, researching healthcare, setting up insurance, that's maybe 2 to 3 months prior, sorting belongings and shipping 1 to 2 months before, and then tying up all those financial and administrative loose ends in your home country in that final month. As for what people underestimate, often it's the sheer volume of administrative details, the little things.
The administrative details, right? Tell me more about that. What are the absolutely essential documents we need to gather? And what's the biggest, tripwire there?
Okay, it's critical to prepare a specific set of documents before you even think about leaving. We're talking your passport, obviously, needs to be valid for at least 6 months beyond your planned arrival date. That's standard. Then certified copies, and I stress certified, of birth certificates, marriage certificates, if that applies, academic credentials, so diplomas, transcripts, professional licenses, financial records like bank statements, investment accounts, pension docs, recent tax returns from home, medical records, think vaccination history, prescriptions, general history, your driving license, and definitely get an international driving permit if you need one, and even pet documentation if you're bringing furry friends. Pet passports, vaccinations, microchip info, keep digital copies of everything in cloud storage, but also bring physical copies organized in a good portfolio. But here's the real nugget, the biggest delay for most people. It's incorrect or missing apostles or legalizations on those official documents.
Ah, the apostles. I've heard about that.
Exactly. Don't underestimate that step. It's often the first major hurdle where relocations falter because one missing stamp can just halt your entire process.
Yeah.
Seriously.
That's a super valuable insight right there. Okay, shifting gears a bit. The financial side of things before you move. What are the key foundations people should establish to ensure a smooth transition?
Right. You'll definitely want to establish a solid financial foundation. It's about peace of mind, mostly. This means, first off, researching the cost of living for your chosen region. Really dig into it to create a realistic budget, and absolutely maintain an accessible emergency fund. Unexpected costs always pop up.
How much are we talking for an emergency fund?
Good question. Think 3 to 6 months of your estimated Portuguese living expenses. That's a safe buffer. Also, make preliminary banking arrangements, like research Portuguese bank accounts, figure out international transfer capabilities. Plan for optimal currency exchange. Don't just accept the first rate you see. Understand the tax implications, both in Portugal and your home country. Double taxation is a thing to avoid. Consider any investment adjustments needed for Portuguese residency. And, crucially, secure comprehensive insurance coverage. Health, obviously, but also home, auto if you plan to drive, and travel insurance for the move itself.
We've covered the crucial groundwork before you even leave home. Super important stuff. But picture this. You land in Portugal, you're excited, ready to start your new life. What's the very first administrative hurdle you'll likely hit? The one that unlocks everything else. It seems to be all about this little number called the NEF. Why is it so incredibly critical?
It truly is the master key, honestly. The NIF, or Número de Identificação Fiscal. That's your Portuguese tax identification number, and it's absolutely essential for almost everything you'll do. No exaggeration. You literally cannot open a bank account. You can't sign a rental or property contract, get utilities set up, buy a car. Countless other official procedures all need that NIF.
Okay, so it's non-negotiable. How do you actually get one of these magical numbers? What are the main ways?
There are basically two main paths you can take. The first is doing it in person once you're actually in Portugal. You visit a local finances office, that's the tax office. Bring your passport, proof of address, could be a temporary one initially. You fill out a simple form, pay a small fee, maybe around €10, and usually you walk out with your NIF right then and there.
That sounds pretty straightforward. What's the other option?
The second option is getting it from abroad, before you even arrive. This is popular. Now, for non-residents, this requires appointing a Portuguese fiscal representative. This is mandatory if you don't live there yet. You grant them power of attorney, a specific one, just for this. They submit the application on your behalf. You pay their service fees, usually somewhere between €100 and €200, and then you receive your NIF documentation by email. Very convenient.
That remote option does sound incredibly convenient, especially for planning ahead. But is there a common pitfall people face when using a fiscal representative? Something we should warn them about?
That's a great question, and yes, there can be a catch. While it's super convenient, the absolute key is trusting your representative, choosing the right one. This person or company acts as your official intermediary with the Portuguese tax authorities. And critically, they receive official tax communications on your behalf. All your mail from the tax office goes to them first.
Okay, so if they're not on the ball.
Exactly. If they're not diligent or if there's miscommunication, you could miss important deadlines, maybe even incur fines without realizing it. So make sure you vet them thoroughly, read reviews, ask for recommendations, choose someone reputable. The good news is, once you establish residency in Portugal yourself, you can usually remove this fiscal representative, which is often a goal for many people.
Okay, NIF in hand. Done. Your next big hurdle, it seems, is often banking. What are the bank account options in Portugal? What's the general landscape like over there?
Portugal has a pretty robust banking sector, yeah. It's a mix of traditional, brick and mortar banks and newer digital options. For the traditional banks, you'll find major players like Millennium BCP, that's the largest private bank. There's Novo Banco. They're often highlighted for having good expat services. Santander Toda, very international, good English support usually. Caixa Geral de Depósitos, which is a major state-owned bank. Solid, dependable. Then you have more digitally focused banks like Activo Bank, which is actually part of Millennium BCP, but more streamlined, and Banco CTT, which operates out of post offices, so they're very accessible physically.
And the online banks, they seem popular everywhere now.
Absolutely. They're a huge draw for many expats. You've got N26, Revolut, Wise.
Okay.
They operate in Portugal too. They often offer great multi-currency accounts and really competitive currency exchange rates, which is a big plus when you're dealing with international finances.
So what's involved in actually opening an account once you're there, at one of the traditional banks, say?
Yeah.
Are there hidden fees or things to watch out for?
Okay. For opening a traditional account, you'll generally need your passport, your shiny new NIF. Proof of address, sometimes they'll accept your home country address initially, but they'll want a Portuguese one eventually. Proof of income or employment is often required, too. And some banks might insist on a Portuguese phone number. Plus, usually an initial deposit, though it's often not huge.
Is it just walk in or better to book?
It's always best to schedule an appointment. Saves you a lot of waiting around. You'll fill out forms, choose the account features you want, set up online and mobile banking access. And typically your debit card will arrive by mail in about 5 to 10 business days. As for fees, well, monthly maintenance can range from €0 up to maybe €7. Sometimes it's waived if you meet certain conditions like minimum balance or direct deposit.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Debit card annual fees are usually low, €0 to €20. Credit card annual fees are higher, think €20 to €40, maybe more for premium cards. A really nice perk, though, is that ATM withdrawals are usually free at any Portuguese ATM network. Multibanco. That's super convenient. International transfers, though, can vary wildly, from like 50 cents up to €40 depending on the amount, destination, and how you do it. Digital statements are free, but if you want paper ones mailed, they might charge you a couple of euros. The key insight here. While many online banks definitely offer lower fees, the traditional banks often provide much more comprehensive in-person support, and that can be invaluable, especially when you're first settling in and navigating everything.
Makes sense. Okay, now that you're set up financially, the next big step is finding a home. What kind of housing options are available in Portugal? What are the distinct flavors, so to speak?
Portugal offers a really diverse range of housing, which is great, something for most tastes and budgets. In cities, apartments are definitely the most common. You'll find everything from charming old historic flats and tiled buildings to sleek modern builds. If you prefer more space or you're looking outside the main cities, houses, which they call moradias, are more typical. These are common in suburbs and rural areas. You'll also find townhouses, known as casas geminadas, in both urban and suburban settings, often attached or semi-detached. For those dreaming of a proper rural escape, you might look at rustic properties or quintas. These often come with a chunk of land, maybe olive groves or vineyards.
Oh, a quinta sounds lovely.
They can be amazing. And if you're up for a project, maybe something to put your own stamp on, there are definitely many renovation opportunities available across the country. Older stone houses needing some love.
Okay, let's talk renting first. Walk us through the typical rental process, and probably most importantly for listeners, what sort of costs should people budget for accommodation in 2025? This seems to vary wildly.
It really does vary wildly. Location is everything. But the process itself is fairly standard. You typically start by browsing the big online platforms. Idealista is huge, Virtual is another popular one, even OLX for private listings. You contact the listing agents or owners, arrange viewings, definitely view in person if you can, or get a trusted contact to. Then you provide documentation for your application. Usually your passport, your NIF, and proof of income is standard. Landlords want to see you can afford it.
What about contracts and deposits?
Right. Rental contracts are typically for a minimum of 1 year, often with options to renew automatically. You'll almost always need to pay a security deposit, usually 1 or 2 months' rent up front. Sometimes they ask for the first month's rent too, so be prepared for that initial outlay. Crucially, the rental contract must be registered with the tax authorities, finances, by the landlord. This protects both parties. And finally, once you have the keys, you'll need to arrange for utilities, electricity, water, gas if applicable, and internet.
Okay, now the big question, the costs. What are we looking at for 2025? Let's break it down by area, maybe.
Let's try. Bear in mind these are estimates and can fluctuate. So Lisbon city center, for a 1-bedroom apartment, you're probably looking at 900 to 1,800 euro a month, maybe even more in crime spots.
Wow.
Yeah. For a 2-bedroom in central Lisbon, easily 1,400 to 2,500. If you go to the outskirts of Lisbon, the prices drop significantly. A 1-bedroom might be more like 700 to 1,200. A 2-bedroom, 900 to 1,800.
Okay, that's a big difference already. What about Porto?
Porto is generally a bit more affordable than Lisbon, but catching up. City center Porto, a 1-bedroom could be 700 to 1,300 euro, 2-bedroom, 1,000 to 2,000 euro. Porto outskirts, again, cheaper, 550 to 900 for 1 bed, 750 to 1,400 for a 2-bed.
And the Algarve. Popular spot.
The Algarve. Prices vary a lot between towns in proximity to the coast, and they definitely spike in the summer high season. Generally expect maybe 600 to 1,200 euro for a 1-bedroom, 800 to 1,800 for a 2-bedroom. But again, very location and season dependent.
What about less famous regions, like the Silver Coast or central Portugal?
Right, this is where it gets more affordable. The Silver Coast, you might find a 1-bedroom for 500 euro to 900, 2-bedrooms 700 to 1,300. Central Portugal, think areas like Coimbra or inland regions, it can be even lower. Maybe 400 to 700 for a 1-bedroom, 600 to 1,100 for a 2-bedroom, and truly rural areas you could find rentals from 350 euro, 650 euro for a 1-bed, 500 euro, 900 for a 2-bed.
That's a huge range. It really underscores the importance of researching specific towns and areas based on your budget. Looking just outside the main hotspots seems key.
Absolutely. It's a common journey, as I mentioned. People might initially dream of Lisbon, see the prices, and then discover fantastic quality of life and much lower cost in Porto or the Silver Coast or central regions. Portugal's charm and affordability extend far beyond the capital. Location is absolutely paramount to your budget.
Okay, let's switch to buying. What if you want to buy property? Is that process super complicated for foreigners? And what are those hidden costs beyond the purchase price?
Buying property definitely involves several key steps, more than renting. It's manageable, but you need to be organized. You'll start with the property search, obviously, using agents, websites like Idealista again, or maybe directly from developers. Then arranging financing. Foreign buyers can get Portuguese mortgages, often up to 70–80% of the property value, but requirements can be strict. Crucial next step is due diligence. This is where you, or usually your lawyer, verifies the property title, caderneta predial, checks building permits, licença de utilização, and looks for any debts or encumbrances attached to the property. Don't skip this.
Lawyer is essential then.
Highly, highly recommended, especially for navigating the legalities and paperwork in Portuguese. Next, usually a reservation agreement, contrato de reserva, with a small initial deposit, maybe 5,000 to 10,000, to take the property off the market. This is followed by the main promissory contract, the CPCV, Contrato de Promessa de Compra y Venda. This is legally binding and involves a larger deposit, typically 20–30% of the purchase price. Then comes a final deed, the escritura, which is signed at a notary's office. You make the final payment and ownership is transferred. After that, property registration, registro predial, in your name, and finally, transferring taxes and utilities into your name.
Okay, that sounds like a process. Now, the costs beyond the price tag.
Right, this is where people can get caught out if they haven't budgeted properly. There are several additional costs. The big one is IMT, the property transfer tax. It's on a sliding scale based on the property value and type, ranging from 0% up to 8%. Then there's stamp duty, imposto do selo, which is a flat 0.8% of the property value. Notary and registration fees usually add up to around 1% combined. Legal fees for your lawyer, typically 1–2% of the purchase price, sometimes a fixed fee. And then there's the ongoing annual property tax, called IMI, Imposto Municipal sobre Imóveis. This is set by the local municipality and is usually between 0.3% and 0.45% of the property's registered tax value each year.
So adding all that up.
Yeah, you should realistically budget for an extra 10% to 15% on top of the listed purchase price to cover all these taxes and fees. It's significant. Oh, and real estate agent commission is usually paid by the seller, typically 5–7%, so that's built into the asking price usually.
Good to know. Okay, beyond having a roof over your head, health is absolutely paramount. What's the healthcare system like in Portugal? Is it easy to get access as an expat?
Portugal actually boasts a pretty well-regarded healthcare system, though like any system, it has its pros and cons. It operates on a kind of three-tier structure. First, there's the public healthcare system, the SNS, Serviço Nacional de Saúde. This aims for universal coverage for all legal residents. It's largely funded through taxation, and users typically pay small co-payments for services.
So like the NHS in the UK, conceptually.
Sort of, yeah, in terms of being tax-funded and aiming for universal access. Then you have health subsystems. These are often occupation-based schemes offering complementary coverage, like ADSE for public sector employees. These are partly funded through employee contributions. Most expats won't interact with these directly unless they work in specific sectors. And finally, there's a robust private healthcare sector. This is a network of private hospitals, clinics, and doctors. You access it either through private health insurance or by paying directly out of pocket. It generally offers faster access to specialists and appointments, often more modern facilities and more amenities.
Do expats tend to use public, private, or both?
Many expats, especially those who can afford it, opt for a combination. They register with the public SNS for basic coverage and emergencies, but also take out private insurance for faster access to specialists, elective procedures, and maybe a wider choice of doctors or English-speaking practitioners.
Okay, so if you want to get into that public system, the SNS, how do you actually do it? What's the process?
To access the public SNS, the first step is you absolutely must have a legal residence permit for Portugal. That's the gateway. Once you have your residency, you need to register with Social Security, Segurança Social, to get your Social Security number, NISS. This might happen automatically if you're employed, or you might need to apply for it. With your residence permit and NISS number, you then go to your local Centro de Saúde, which is the local health center for your registered address. You register there with your documents, residence permit, NISS, passport, NIF, proof of address. They'll issue you an SNS user number, número de utente.
And then you get a family doctor.
You'll be assigned a family doctor, médico de familia, when one becomes available at that health center. Be aware, though, especially in popular areas like Lisbon or the Algarve, there can be waiting lists to actually get assigned a specific doctor. You can still use the health center's services in the meantime, but having that dedicated GP is ideal.
Right. What about the private options? You mentioned insurance. What are typical costs like?
For private health insurance, you've got choices. You can look at international health insurance plans, which often offer broader global coverage, or local Portuguese plans from insurers like Medis, Multicare, Part of Fidelidade, or Advance Care linked to Tranquilidade. There are also more specific plans like hospital-only plans or dental plans. Typical costs for 2025? Well, for basic private coverage for an individual, you might be looking at around 40 to 80 euro per month. For more comprehensive coverage, maybe 80 to 150 euros per month. Family plans could range from 150 to 350 or more, depending on ages and coverage levels. A key thing to note, Premiums increase significantly with age, especially after 55 or 60. It can get quite expensive for older residents.
Okay, and what about the actual costs of care? Co-pays in public versus paying out of pocket in private.
In the public system, SNS, once you're a registered resident with your user number, the co-payments, taxes moderadores, are generally quite low. Think maybe 5 to 15 euro for a primary care visit at the health center, 7 to 20 euro for a specialist consultation booked through the SNS. Emergency room urgencies visits might be 15 euro, but this fee is often waived if you're actually admitted to the hospital. Hospital daily charges might be around 20-25, and there's partial coverage for basic prescription medications.
And if you go private without insurance?
Then the costs are obviously higher, more comparable to private care in other Western countries. A GP consultation might be 70 to 100 euros. Seeing a specialist may be 80 to 150 plus to stray. An ER visit at a private hospital could be 100 to 250 euro just to walk in. Simple diagnostic tests like blood work, 50 euro, 200 euros. Complex imaging like an MRI, 200 euro, 400 or more. And a daily charge for a room in a private hospital could easily be 300, 500 euro and more. So the critical insight here is definitely that while public healthcare is accessible and very affordable once you're registered, private insurance can significantly reduce wait times, offer more choice, maybe more English-speaking staff, and protect you from those high out-of-pocket costs. Many find that peace of mind worth the premium.
Absolutely. Okay, so you're in, you're housed, you're insured. Now you actually need to get around. What are the public transportation options like in Portugal? And how feasible is it for foreigners to drive there? Is it chaos?
Haha. Well, driving can be an experience, especially in older city centers. But overall, Portugal offers excellent public transportation, particularly in and between the major cities. You've got modern metro systems in Lisbon and Porto, which are clean and efficient. There are extensive urban and intercity bus networks covering pretty much the whole country. Reed Expressos is a major long-distance bus company. Trains connect major cities and regions quite well. CP, Comboios de Portugal, is the national rail operator. High-speed alpha pendular trains link Lisbon, Porto, and the Algarve. You'll find those iconic historic trams in Lisbon and Porto, which are great for tourists, but also used by locals, alongside modern trams in some areas. And ferries are important along rivers like the Tagus in Lisbon and for coastal hops, especially in the Algarve.
What about ride-sharing and passes?
Yep. Ride-sharing services like Uber, Bolt, and FreeNow operate in the major cities and are usually quite affordable. For regular commuters, transportation passes offer great value. Lisbon's Navigante card covers the entire metropolitan area, metro, bus, tram, ferry, even some local trains for around 40 euro monthly. Porto has the Andante card system, with monthly passes for different zones typically costing 30 euro. There are also good discounts available, senior discounts for those over 65, student discounts, and various CP train discounts for frequent travelers or off-peak travel.
Okay, sounds pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
How about driving? EU license versus non-EU.
Right. If you have a driving license issued by an EU country, it's generally valid in Portugal indefinitely and no hoops to jump through. If your license is from a non-EU country, it's typically valid for 185 days after you officially establish residency in Portugal. An international driving permit, IDP, accompanying your home license is highly recommended during that initial period, and sometimes legally required depending on your home country's agreements with Portugal.
And after those 185 days?
After 185 days of residency, you are legally required to exchange your non-EU license for a Portuguese one. You can't just keep driving on your old license plus IDP forever.
How hard is that exchange process?
It involves making an appointment with the IMT, Instituto da Mobilidade dos Transportes, which is the transport authority. You need to submit your original home country license, proof of residency, your NIF, passport, a medical examination certificate from a Portuguese doctor confirming fitness to drive, and pay a fee, which is currently around 30 euro. They take your old license and eventually issue you a Portuguese driving license. The processing time can vary, sometimes taking several months, during which you might get temporary driving permission.
What if you want to actually purchase a car in Portugal or maybe even bring your current vehicle with you from home? What are the costs and processes involved there? Is this straightforward?
Purchasing a car in Portugal is relatively straightforward, but potentially expensive. You'll need your NIF, your residence permit, proof of address in Portugal, and either a Portuguese driving license or a valid foreign license within that initial 185-day period, or if it's an EU license. You can buy new or used cars from dealerships or through private sales found online on sites like Stand Virtual or OLX. The registration process involves getting a vehicle inspection, if the car is used in over a certain age, registering the car in your name with the IMT, Purchasing mandatory third-party liability insurance comprehensive is optional but recommended. Paying the vehicle registration tax, which is called ISV, Imposto sobre Vehículos. This is a one-time tax based on engine size and CO2 emissions, and it can be very high, especially for larger engines or older, less efficient cars. This is a big part of why cars are expensive there.
The ISV, that's the killer tax I've heard about.
That's the one. And then there's the annual road tax called IUC, Imposto Único de Circulación, which depends on the vehicle's age, fuel type, engine size, and emissions. This can range from maybe €20 for a small, efficient car up to €500 or more for older, larger vehicles per year. A key insight, as you noted, is that new car prices are generally 10–30% higher in Portugal than in many other EU countries, largely due to that high ISV tax. And mandatory insurance typically costs around €300 annually, depending on the car, your driving history, and location.
Okay, what about importing your own car? Is that even worth considering with the ISV?
Importing your own vehicle. It can be done, but it's often complex and potentially very expensive due to taxes. Temporary importation is allowed for tourists or short stays, usually up to 183 days in any 12-month period. But if you're establishing residency, you generally need to permanently import and register the vehicle on Portuguese plates after that initial period. This involves a lot of paperwork. The vehicle's original registration documents, a certificate of conformity, MECA C, to prove it meets EU standards, proof of ownership, customs forms. The vehicle will likely need a technical and emissions inspection in Portugal. And then, yes, taxes are calculated based on the vehicle's age, CO2 emissions, engine size, and market value. That ISV still applies.
Is there any way around that ISV for imported cars?
There is a potential exemption, but the rules are strict. You may qualify for a tax exemption on ISV if you've owned the vehicle in your previous country of residence for at least 12 months before moving to Portugal. You lived outside Portugal for at least 12 months prior to moving. You import the vehicle within 12 months of officially establishing residency in Portugal, and you commit to keeping the vehicle and not selling it for at least 12 months after importation. Meeting all these criteria can save you a significant amount, but the documentation required to prove it all is extensive. The biggest challenge is often gathering all that paperwork and ensuring you meet every single condition for the exemption. Many people find it easier just to sell their car back home and buy one locally in Portugal.
That sounds like sound advice, unless you're really attached to your car or it's particularly valuable. Okay, moving on. Beyond getting from A to B, staying connected is absolutely vital these days.
Yeah.
What are the mobile phone service options in Portugal? Are there any particular providers expats tend to lean towards?
Staying connected is pretty easy in Portugal. The mobile market is competitive. The major operators are MEO, which is part of Altis, formerly Portugal Telecom, generally considered to have the widest coverage, especially rurally. Vodafone, which is very strong, particularly in urban areas, and often praised for data speeds and customer service, including English support. Inos, another major player, often has competitive pricing and bundles, including TV and internet. And then there's NOWO, which is more of a budget-friendly option, sometimes with slightly less coverage, but good deals.
What about plans? Prepaid or contract?
You have all the usual options. Prepaid, prepago, or pay-as-you-go is very common and flexible. No contract needed. You just top up as you need. Great for when you first arrive. Postpaid, postpago, involves a monthly contract, usually 12 or 24 months. These typically offer better rates, especially for data allowances, and often include bundles with multiple SIMs or discounts. There are also special tourist SIM packages available at the airport or phone stores. Good for short trips, but usually more expensive per GB than regular plans.
What do you need to get set up?
For a simple prepaid SIM, you usually just need your passport or ID to buy it. Very easy. For a postpaid contract, they'll typically require your passport ID, your NIF, proof of a Portuguese address, and often a Portuguese bank account for direct debit payments, maybe an initial payment or deposit. Typical costs for 2025, basic prepaid top-ups might effectively cost you €7–15 a month depending on usage. Standard postpaid plans with decent data might be €15 monthly. Family plans with multiple SIMs could be €30 and high data plans for heavy users might run €25 or more. In terms of what expats lean towards, Vodafone and MEO seem very popular, often cited for reliability and decent English support, but it's worth comparing current deals from all providers when you arrive.
And what about home internet? And bundling TV and phone, is that common, or do you piece everything together?
Bundling is absolutely the norm in Portugal for home services. It's almost harder not to bundle sometimes. For fixed internet, fiber optic, Fibra, is now widely available in most urban areas and increasingly in many rural towns too. It offers the best speeds, often 100 Mbps up to 1 Gbps. Cable internet is an alternative where fiber isn't available yet. ADSL is still used in some more remote areas, but it's much slower. And 4G or 5G home internet using the mobile network is also an option, especially in areas with poor fixed line infrastructure.
Who are the main providers for this?
It's the same big names, mostly. MEO, NOS, and Vodafone dominate the fixed line market. And OWO also offers fixed services in some areas. Service packages, as I said, typically bundle services. They call them POCOTs. You'll usually get internet, choose your speed, television, ranging from basic channel packages to premium ones with sports and movies, often a fixed telephone line, even if you don't use it, and frequently options to add mobile phone service for a quad play bundle discount.
What are the typical costs for these bundles?
Costs vary depending on the internet speed, TV channels included, and whether mobile is added. For internet only, which can sometimes be hard to find without TV, maybe €25 monthly. Internet plus a basic TV package, likely €30, 50. Triple play packages, internet, TV, fixed phone are very common, around €40. And quad play, adding mobile SIMs, could range from €50 or more depending on the number of SIMs and data allowances. The key insight here really is that these bundles almost always offer significant savings compared to trying to pay for internet, TV, and mobile services separately from different providers. So it's always worth comparing the full package deals even if you don't think you need, say, the fixed phone line.
That makes sense. Okay, practicalities are getting sorted.
Yeah.
But what about truly integrating? Language is often the biggest hurdle, right? What should listeners know about Portuguese and how can they best approach learning it?
Absolutely. Language is huge for integration. Portuguese is the official language, of course. It's a Romance language, Latin-based, but it has very specific pronunciation rules that can be tricky for English speakers initially, sounds that don't exist in English. And it's really important to note that European Portuguese, which is what's spoken in Portugal, differs quite significantly from Brazilian Portuguese, mainly in accent and rhythm, but also some vocabulary and grammar. So make sure you're learning the right version.
How widely spoken is English? Can you get by without Portuguese?
English proficiency varies a lot. In major tourist areas like Lisbon, Porto, and the Algarve, and among younger generations or those working in tourism and international business, you'll find plenty of English speakers. You can get by in those contexts. However, outside those bubbles, in smaller towns, dealing with bureaucracy or just for deeper social connections and daily life shopping, local cafes English is much less common. The real insight here is that while you might manage initially without it in some places, learning even basic Portuguese is absolutely key for deeper integration. It genuinely enhances your daily life, shows respect for the local culture, and opens up so many more opportunities and interactions. People really appreciate the effort.
That makes perfect sense. So beyond just using Duolingo on the train, what are some of the most effective resources for seriously learning Portuguese?
Duolingo, Memrise, Babbel, Pimsleur, those apps are great starting points, definitely good for vocabulary and basic structures. But to really progress, you'll likely want more. There are government-funded language programs specifically for foreigners, like Portuguese para Todos, Portuguese for All, often run through schools or job centers. Check local availability. Private language schools are abundant throughout the country, offering various levels and intensities. University extension courses can be excellent, offering more academic rigor. Online platforms like Italki and Perply are fantastic for finding affordable one-on-one tutoring with native speakers, which is great for conversation practice. Don't underestimate the power of informal language exchange groups finding locals who want to practice English in exchange for helping you with Portuguese. Meetup groups, local Facebook groups, and if you can swing it, intensive immersion classes right there in Portugal can give you a huge boost.
Any communication tips for beginners?
Yes. Learn the basic greetings and courtesy phrases immediately. Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, por favor, obrigado, obrigada. They go a long, long way. Use translation apps like Google Translate or DeepL when you're stuck, but try not to rely on them completely. Understand that Portuguese culture generally appreciates personal warmth and maybe closer personal space than some Northern European or North American cultures. Be patient with yourself and with others trying to understand you. Most Portuguese are incredibly patient and genuinely appreciate any effort you make to speak their language, even if it's broken. Also, be aware that Portuguese distinguishes between formal, let's say you're using the third person, and informal to address. It's safer to start formal unless someone invites you to use tu, and accents and some vocabulary can differ quite a bit by region within Portugal, too.
Fascinating. Okay, for families moving over, education is obviously a massive consideration. What are the school options for children in Portugal? And how do you even begin to enroll them? It sounds daunting.
It's a big decision for sure, but Portugal offers several good educational pathways for children. You have the public school system, which provides free education for all residents. Instruction is entirely in Portuguese, following the national curriculum. Quality can vary, like anywhere, but it's generally well regarded and the primary choice for most Portuguese families. Great for full immersion. Then there are private Portuguese schools. These are fee-paying, often have smaller class sizes or maybe more resources, but they still generally follow the Portuguese national curriculum and teach primarily in Portuguese. Some might have stronger language programs. International schools are another major option, especially popular with expats. These typically follow foreign curricula like British, IGCSE, A-levels, American High School Diploma, AP, International Baccalaureate, IB, or French, German, etc. Instruction is usually in English or bilingual. They're fee-paying, often significantly more expensive than private Portuguese schools.
Are there other types?
And finally, you'll find some religious schools, typically Catholic ones, which usually combine the Portuguese curriculum with religious instruction, also fee-paying. The big decision for parents often revolves around language. Do you want full immersion in Portuguese or continuity with an English international curriculum? Curriculum continuity and, of course, cost.
That is a huge decision. How do you navigate the actual enrollment process, say for public schools versus international ones? Are they very different?
The processes are quite different, yes. For public school enrollment, you typically register at the local school grouping, Agrupamento de Escolas, or sometimes directly at the city's education department, municipal. You'll need to provide proof of residence within the school's catchment area. That's key. You usually go to your local school. You'll also need your child's identification documents, passport, residence permit, their previous academic records, translated if necessary, medical and vaccination records, make sure vaccinations are up to date according to the Portuguese schedule, and passport-style photos. It's fairly straightforward once you have your residency and address sorted.
And for the international schools?
For international school admission, the process is quite different. You apply directly to the specific school you're interested in. They often have their own application forms, deadlines, and requirements. Entrance assessments or tests are common, especially for older grades. They'll want previous school records and often teacher recommendations. Interviews with both the student and parents are usually part of the process. And be prepared for significant registration fees, deposits, and annual tuition fees, plus costs for uniforms, books, materials, and maybe transportation. Waiting lists can also be long for popular international schools, so apply early.
What about the school year itself? When does it run?
The typical Portuguese academic year starts in mid-September. The first term runs until just before Christmas, followed by a 2-week Christmas break. The second term goes from early January until Easter, with a 2-week Easter break, which might shift slightly depending on when Easter falls. The third term runs from after Easter until mid-June, followed by the long summer break until mid-September again. Daily schedules vary, but primary schools often run from around 9:00 a.m. to 3:3 p.m. or 4:0 p.m. Secondary schools might start earlier, say 8:30 a.m., and finish later, maybe 4:3 p.m. or 5:00 p.m. There's usually a generous lunch break of 1 to 1.5 hours. Some schools offer optional extended care, prolongamento de horario, until 6:00 p.m. or so, often for a fee.
Okay, we've got our homes, our finances sorted, connectivity, maybe even schools. For many, the next big piece of the puzzle is work. What does the Portuguese job market actually look like for newcomers, and how easy is it to plug into it?
The Portuguese job market is, well, it's a mixed picture. There has been growth, definitely, particularly in certain sectors like technology. Lisbon and Porto are becoming major tech hubs. Tourism is always huge, of course. Healthcare, especially private healthcare, and renewable energy are also growth areas. However, it's important to be realistic. Some challenges persist. Salaries in general tend to be lower than in Northern European countries or North America. And competition for good jobs can be high, especially in fields that aren't experiencing shortages.
What about language requirements for work?
Portuguese language proficiency is essential for the vast majority of positions, unless you're working for a multinational company where English is the primary language, or perhaps in very specific high-demand tech roles or tourism jobs dealing directly with foreigners, you'll likely need good Portuguese. The work culture itself, it often emphasizes building relationships. There can be a sense of hierarchy, but there's also a strong emphasis on work-life balance compared to some other cultures. The standard working week is 40 hours, and legally mandated annual vacation is 22 working days.
So if you're looking for a job, what are the best avenues to explore? And what about the self-employed route or being a digital nomad? That seems increasingly popular in Portugal.
For traditional employment, online job portals are the obvious starting point. LinkedIn is widely used, Indeed too. Local Portuguese sites like Net Empregos, Sapo Emprego, and specialist sites like IT Jobs for tech roles are crucial. Recruitment agencies are also very active, big international names like Michael Page, Hayes, Randstad, but also smaller local ones specializing in certain sectors. Networking is really important in Portugal. Connecting through professional associations, chambers of commerce, attending industry events, personal connections can go a long way. Applying directly to company websites that interest you is always worth doing. And don't forget the government job centers, the IEFP, Instituto de Emprego e Formação Profissional, which list vacancies and offer support services.
Okay, and the self-employed path.
Right. Self-employment or freelancing, trabajador independente, is very common in Portugal, and the system is relatively well set up for it, although it involves some bureaucracy initially. You must officially activate your activity with the tax authorities, finances, choosing specific service codes, CAEs, that match what you do. You also need to register with Social Security, Segurança Social, as self-employed. Tax considerations are key here. You'll likely choose between the simplified regime simplificado, where taxes are calculated on a presumed percentage of your income, or organized accounting, contabilidade organizada, which requires a certified accountant but allows deduction of actual business expenses. The best choice depends on your income level and expenses.
Sounds like accountant advice is needed there, too.
Definitely advisable, yes. You'll also likely need to handle quarterly VAT declarations, Declaração Periódica do IVA, if your income exceeds a certain threshold. You file an annual income tax declaration, Declaração do IRS, and you make monthly or quarterly Social Security contributions based on your income. The required documentation includes your NIF, your Social Security number, a residency permit that allows self-employment, not all visa types do initially, and any professional certifications, if applicable to your field. The key insight here is that while the initial setup with finanças and Segurança Social can seem a bit daunting, Portugal is actually very geared towards self-employed individuals once you understand the system. Lots of people do it.
And digital nomads. Portugal seems like a hotspot.
It really has become one, especially with the introduction of the D8 Digital Nomad Visa. This visa is specifically designed for remote workers who earn income from foreign employers or clients outside Portugal. This has put Portugal firmly on the map for location-independent professionals. Beyond just having a visa category, a unique aspect we touched on earlier is the potential to combine being a digital nomad with the non-habitual resident NHR tax benefits if you qualify. That combination can be incredibly financially attractive.
Where do nomads tend to congregate?
Major cities like Lisbon and Porto have thriving digital nomad communities and tons of co-working spaces. Madeira Island is another huge hub, actively promoting itself to nomads. And areas in the Algarve are popular too. The internet infrastructure is generally excellent, with reliable high-speed internet widely available in most urban and coastal areas, which is crucial for remote work.
That's fascinating. And the D8 visa and potential NHR benefits really change the game. This inevitably brings us back to the huge topic, taxes and finances within Portugal. All this financial activity leads to taxes. What should listeners know about managing their finances day to day, the overall Portuguese tax system, and let's revisit those special tax regimes like NHR.
Okay, let's quickly recap the cost of living first, as it directly impacts your financial management. For a couple living in Portugal in 2025, as we discussed, rentals vary, but total approximate monthly expenses might range broadly from $1,780 to $3,630. That includes housing, $700 or $1,900 range, utilities, $100 to $80, groceries, $300 to $500, dining out, $200 $400, transportation, $80 $150 logs, maybe private healthcare, $100 $200, entertainment, $100 $300, and miscellaneous bits, $200 $400, again, highly dependent on location and lifestyle.
So tips for managing money once you're there.
Definitely leverage multi-currency solutions like Wise or Revolut, especially early on, or if you still have income expenses abroad. They make transfers and currency exchange much cheaper and easier. Set up standing orders, débitos diretos, for regular bills like rent, utilities, phone, internet. It's standard practice. Research Portuguese and international investment platforms if you plan to invest while resident there. Options exist, but may differ from home. Always maintain that 3-6-month emergency fund in an easily accessible account. Consider consulting a financial advisor who specializes in expatriate finances, especially if you have complex assets or cross-border income. They can help navigate Portuguese rules and tax treaties, and critically, update your wills and any succession planning to account for assets held in Portugal. Inheritance laws differ.
Okay, the tax system itself. Key things to know.
The main thing is becoming a tax resident. You're generally considered a tax resident automatically if you spend more than 183 days in Portugal within any calendar year, January-December, or if you have your primary home there, suggesting permanence. The Portuguese tax year is the calendar year, January 1st to December 31st. The annual income tax return, declaração de IRS, is filed online between April 1st and June 30th of the following year. So for 2024 income, you file between April and June 2025. Personal income tax rates are progressive, meaning the rate increases with income level. For 2024-2025, the brackets range from 14.5% on lower incomes up to 48% on income over about €80,000, plus potential solidarity surcharges on very high incomes.
What about Social Security and other taxes?
Social Security contributions, as mentioned, are 11% of gross salary for employees paid by the employee, with the employer contributing more. For self-employed individuals, the standard rate is 21.4% of their relevant income base. Capital gains on things like stocks or property, if not your primary residence, and dividend income are generally taxed at a flat rate of 28%, though you might be able to opt for inclusion in progressive rates if that's more beneficial. Taxation of foreign income depends heavily on your residency status, NHR or standard resident, and the specifics of any double taxation agreement, DTA, between Portugal and the country where the income originates. DTAs prevent you from being taxed twice on the same income.
Right, which brings us back to the NHR. We know it's appealing. Last 10 years need to be non-resident for 5 years prior. Can you quickly recap the main benefits again, and is it still available or changing?
The NHR non-habitual resident regime has been a huge draw. The main potential benefits were 1. Possible tax exemption in Portugal for most types of foreign-sourced income, like pensions, dividends, interests, royalties, rental income, provided it could be taxed in the source country according to the DTA, even if it wasn't actually taxed there. 2. A flat tax rate of 20% on Portuguese-sourced employment or self-employment income derived from specific high-value-added activities listed by the government, like certain tech roles, engineers, doctors, artists, etc., instead of the normal progressive rates up to 48%.
Okay, sounds great. But is it still exactly like that? I feel like I heard about changes.
You heard right. This is critical and a very recent development. The original NHR regime, as described with those broad foreign income exemptions, was discontinued for new applicants as of January 1st, 2024.
So new movers can't get that old NHR anymore.
Correct. If you weren't already registered as NHR or hadn't taken concrete steps to become resident before the end of 2023, with some transitional exceptions, you generally can't access that specific regime now.
Wow, okay, so what replaced it? Is there any beneficial regime now?
Yes, thankfully they introduced a new, somewhat similar but more targeted regime, often called NHR 2.0, or the Tax Incentive for Scientific Research and Innovation. This new regime also offers a 10-year duration and provides that 20% flat tax rate on Portuguese employment or self-employment income. However, it's now restricted to individuals working in very specific roles related to scientific research, higher education teaching, technology, and startup companies meeting certain criteria. The list of eligible professions is much narrower than the old NHR's high-value-added list.
And what about foreign income under this new scheme?
The broad exemption for most foreign income is gone under the new scheme. There are still some specific exemptions, for example, for foreign-sourced employment income, but the rules are different and generally less generous than the old NHR. Foreign passive income like dividends or interest would generally be taxed at standard Portuguese rates, often 28%. So the key takeaway is, the extremely broad NHR that attracted many retirees and passive income earners is closed to new entrants. The new incentive focuses very specifically on attracting talent in research, tech, and innovation sectors. Professional tax advice is now more crucial than ever to understand your specific situation. You still need to apply for the new incentive by March 31st of the year after becoming resident.
That's a massive clarification, thank you. Okay, shifting gears slightly. Sometimes it's not just people moving, but furry family members too. What's involved in bringing pets to Portugal, and what about their ongoing care once they're settled?
Bringing pets, usually cats and dogs, is definitely doable, but requires careful planning and adherence to EU regulations. The key requirements are: first, the pet must have an ISO standard microchip implanted before the rabies vaccination. Second, a valid rabies vaccination. The primary vaccination must be given at least 21 days before travel into the EU. Boosters need to be kept up to date. Third, they need either an EU pet passport if traveling from within the EU or certain other European countries, or an official veterinary health certificate issued by a government-approved vet in the country of departure, if coming from outside the EU. This certificate has specific requirements and timing. For some non-EU countries, additional requirements like parasite treatment, especially for tapeworm, might be needed shortly before travel. And there's generally a limit of a maximum of 5 pets per person for non-commercial movement.
What's the process look like practically?
Practically, it involves working closely with your veterinarian well in advance, verifying your pet meets all the health requirements, getting the microchip and vaccinations done in the right order and time frame, obtaining the correct documentation, pet passport or health certificate, from your vet, potentially needing government endorsement too. You need to arrange pet-friendly transportation airlines, have specific rules and kennel requirements for pets in cargo or cabin, if small enough. Notify the airline or transport company well ahead of time. Prepare a proper IATA-compliant travel crate if needed, and supplies like water, food, familiar bedding for the journey. Upon arrival in Portugal, you may need to declare your pet at customs, and they'll check the paperwork and microchip. Afterwards, you should register your pet with the local authorities.
Register them locally. How does that work?
Yes, microchipping is mandatory for all dogs born after July 2008 and recommended for cats. Once resident, you must register your microchip dog, and ideally cat, on the national database, SIX, via a vet, and also usually register them with your local parish council, the Junta de Freguesia. There might be a small annual fee for dog registration locally. The biggest insight here, honestly, is to start this process months in advance with your vet. The timelines, especially for the rabies vaccination and paperwork, are strict and non-negotiable. Don't leave it to the last minute.
Good advice. And ongoing vet care in Portugal.
Veterinary care is widely available. You'll find clinics, clínicas veterinarias, and hospitals in all cities and most towns. Quality is generally good. Pet insurance is also available from various providers if you want coverage for accidents or illnesses. Routine care costs like checkups, vaccinations, flea treatment are generally considered lower than in places like the UK or US. And overall, Portugal has a pretty pet-friendly attitude. Dogs are often welcome in outdoor seating areas of cafes and restaurants, and there are many parks and beaches where they can run around, though check local restrictions.
That's great to hear for pet owners. Now, moving houses often means moving stuff, sometimes a lot of stuff. What about shipping household goods internationally to Portugal? And what are the crucial customs considerations you absolutely need to be aware of?
Relocating your possessions internationally, yeah, that's another big logistical piece. You have several options depending on volume and budget. Full-service international movers offer the most comprehensive service. Packing, inventory, transport, usually sea freight and containers, customs clearance at both ends, delivery, unpacking, and debris removal. Most expensive, but least hassle. You can opt for container shipping yourself, either booking an exclusive use container, FCL full container load, or sharing space in a container, LCL less than container load or groupage. This is often cheaper, but might involve more self-packing or coordination. Air freight is much faster, but significantly more expensive, usually only used for essential items or very valuable things you need quickly. You might need storage solutions either in your home country before shipping or in Portugal upon arrival if your permanent home isn't ready. And for smaller moves, perhaps just boxes or luggage, there are self-service options like international luggage shipping companies. For example, send my bag, luggage forward.
What about customs? Do you pay duty on all your used stuff?
This is key. Under EU and Portuguese rules, there's generally a one-time exemption from import duties and VAT for importing your used personal household effects when you are permanently transferring your residence to Portugal from outside the EU. This is a huge benefit.
How do you qualify for that exemption?
To qualify, you typically need to prove you've lived outside the EU for at least the last 12 months, that you've owned and used the goods being imported for at least 6 months, and that you're establishing your primary residence in Portugal. You'll need specific documentation for customs clearance. This usually includes a detailed inventory list of everything you're shipping, often in Portuguese, proof of your residence change, like your residence permit or visa, and proof you've given up residence elsewhere, your passport and your NIF. Your moving company usually handles the customs declaration process, but relies on you providing accurate info and documents.
Are there restrictions?
Yes. Be aware of restricted or prohibited items, certain foods, especially meat, dairy from outside EU. Plants, firearms, weapons have strict rules. Check the latest regulations. A critical deadline here is that you generally must import your household goods within 12 months of officially establishing your residency in Portugal to qualify for the duty relief. As we discussed earlier, vehicle importation has its own separate complex procedures and potential taxation, ISV. And while there are generally no duties on personal electronics like laptops or phones, The quantities should be reasonable for personal or family use, not commercial levels.
When you're choosing one of those relocation services, what are the absolute must-haves to look for to avoid major headaches down the road? It feels like a service where things could easily go wrong.
Absolutely. Choosing a good international mover is crucial for a stress-free or less stressful relocation. Here's what to look for: credentials and affiliations. Look for movers who are members of recognized international associations like FIDE, which has quality standards like FAME, IM, International Association of Movers, or relevant European ones. This signals a level of professionalism and adherence to standards. Experience specifically with Portugal. Ask about their track record moving people specifically to Portugal. Do they understand the customs procedures, port requirements, local delivery challenges, comprehensive services? Ensure they offer the full range of services you need: professional packing, secure transport, customs brokerage, delivery, unpacking, debris removal, potentially storage, insurance options. Understand their liability coverage and what additional transit insurance options they offer. Make sure you're adequately covered for loss or damage. Read the fine print. Testimonials and independent reviews. Don't just rely on their website testimonials. Look for independent reviews on platforms like Google, Trustpilot, or expat forums. Quote clarity. Get detailed written quotes from several companies. Ensure the quote clearly breaks down all costs: packing, freight, fuel surcharges, customs fees, destination charges, insurance with no hidden fees. Ask specifically what isn't included: timeline guarantees and contingencies. Understand their estimated timeline for packing, shipping, and delivery. What happens if there are delays? What are their contingency plans? The most important thing here really is transparency, clear communication, and checking their reputation thoroughly. Don't just go for the cheapest quote without vetting the company properly.
Excellent checklist. Finally, let's talk about the safety net. Things hopefully you won't need, but should know. What are the key emergency contacts and resources you should absolutely know about in Portugal?
Right. Essential information to have handy from day one. The single most important number is 112. This is the pan-European emergency number, just like 911 in the US or 999 in the UK. It connects you to ambulance, fire, and police services. Operators often speak English, especially in tourist areas, but be prepared to state your location clearly.
So 112 covers everything.
It's the primary one for immediate emergencies, yes. There are also direct numbers for specific services if needed, though 1 in 12 is usually sufficient. The National Republican Guard, GNR, which polices more rural areas, and the Public Security Police, PSP, which covers urban areas, have their own contact numbers, easily found online or via local info. Local firefighter stations, bomberos, also have direct numbers, which vary by town. There's a National Poison Control Center number, 808-250-143. And for coastal areas, Maritime Search and Rescue, 210-911-162.
What about non-emergency support, consulates?
Yes, it's highly advisable to register with your home country's embassy or consulate in Portugal upon arrival. Most have online registration systems, like ISTEP for U.S. citizens or similar systems for UK, Canada, Australia, etc. This helps them contact you in case of a large-scale emergency, natural disaster, political unrest, and keeps you informed about important notices. Understand what your consulate can and cannot do in emergencies. They can help with lost stolen passports, provide lists of local lawyers or doctors, contact family back home in emergencies, but they generally can't pay your bills, get you out of jail, or intervene directly in legal matters. They can also be a resource for things like document services, passport renewals, notarizations, information on overseas voting procedures, sometimes tax assistance seminars, and maybe listings of social services or community events for expats.
Good to know their limits, too. What about healthcare emergencies specifically? Where do you go?
For medical emergencies, you head to the Urgencias department at either a public hospital, Hospital Público, or a private hospital, Hospital Privado. Public hospital urgencias are open to everyone, though there might be longer waits depending on severity. Private hospital urgencias usually require payment up front or proof of insurance. Pharmacies, farmacias, are also a great resource for minor ailments and advice. They rotate 24-hour service, Farmacia de Servicio. Every pharmacy will have a notice posted on its door indicating which nearby pharmacy is currently on 24-hour duty. Some private medical services also offer doctor house calls, médico al domicilio, which can be incredibly convenient, especially for families, although more expensive. Be prepared with language solutions if you don't speak Portuguese well, have a translation app ready, or know key medical phrases. And understand the procedures for obtaining prescription medications. You'll need a prescription, a receita médica, from a Portuguese doctor for most things beyond basic over-the-counter meds. The main insight really is to have these key numbers saved in your phone, know the location of your nearest hospital with urgencias, and maybe your local health center and pharmacy. Have a plan in place before you actually need it.
Absolutely crucial advice. So after all this, what does it all really mean for you, the listener, considering this move? We've just navigated a truly comprehensive guide to moving to Portugal, haven't we? From those very first crucial steps of pre-departure planning, right through to the specifics of healthcare, finding a home, sorting taxes, even bringing your pets along for the ride. It seems really clear that while moving to a beautiful new country like Portugal offers this amazing opportunity to embrace a high quality of life, a rich culture, a genuinely welcoming community, success really depends on thorough preparation and truly understanding all these practical considerations we've talked about.
Indeed. I think Portugal's appeal lies not just in, the obvious things like its beautiful landscapes, the lovely climate, but also in what we've discussed. It's relatively straightforward administrative processes once you know them, the reasonable cost of living, especially outside the main cities, and its increasingly international outlook. It's much more geared towards expats than it used to be. Now, challenges absolutely exist. We shouldn't sugarcoat it, particularly around adapting to the language, finding well-paid employment opportunities depending on your field, and sometimes just navigating the bureaucracy, which can feel slow or opaque at times. But most newcomers find the transition manageable, even enjoyable, if they do their homework, the proper research and preparation. The steps we've outlined today, they really provide a robust roadmap for a successful relocation. Whether you're dreaming of retiring to the sunny Algarve, or maybe working remotely from one of Lisbon's vibrant neighborhoods, or perhaps starting a whole new professional chapter up in Porto.
So, as you consider this potentially life-changing, exciting move, maybe think beyond just the practicalities for a moment. Which aspect of Portuguese life are you most eager to embrace? Is it the bustling coffee culture, those endless pastries, the pastéis in nata? Is it the vibrant summer festivals like the Santos Populares that just light up the streets? Or maybe it's that famous emphasis on work-life balance we mentioned. And how might taking care of all these practicalities we discussed, getting the NIF, the bank account, the housing sorted, how might that actually free you up mentally and logistically to fully dive into that cultural experience, to really savor it and truly make Portugal feel like home? We really hope this deep dive helps you envision your own fulfilling new chapter in your potential Portuguese adventure.